fantastic to see so many people interested in this topic. And what we'll do today is that we'll try and cover the area of getting sowing, introducing community tree nurseries. So it's nothing too technical today, and it's just a little introduction to ourselves, the world of growing trees, and why this is such a great thing to do, why it's so important. We're going to introduce the concept of community tree nurseries and outline what support is out there to help you if you want to get involved. This might include some of our online past masterclasses, sessions that we've got coming up, useful guides that we've got, which are really, really helpful for you going on your tree growing journey, and also a fantastic support network of for prospective tree growers, which we'll talk about a bit later on. We'll talk to one of our very own Young Tree Champion regional leads and teacher of Shinfield St Mary's Primary School, Matt Knight, who's going to outline how he began his tree growing journey and what he does now at his school. It's kind of fairly epic what they've achieved there, so that's one to look out for. And then we'll look at kind of the practical activity of what you can do at this time of year to go out and get on that journey yourself and grow your own trees with the help of our in-house tree propagation whiz, Phil Paolo. What we do is that we hope that those sections will take about an hour, and then going on from there, we'll have half an hour of question and answers, and we'll have a look at some of the questions that you've posed during the talk. So if you have got questions, please do pop them in the question and answer box, which you'll see as a separate box to the chat box, and that's in the bottom bar. Please do use the chat box to make any comments and let us know where you're joining from today, like you've been doing. Should say that all our sessions are recorded and available on YouTube after the session is finished. So if you miss anything or you just want to go back over anything, you can catch up on our YouTube channel, and a link should be dropping to that in the chat now. If you're new to the Tree Council, we're a national charity that brings everybody together for the love of trees. We fund, plant and care trees and hedgerows with our tree wardens and communities across the whole country, and we do this through our community grant schemes. So a huge hello and thank you to any of our tree wardens who are out there watching this today. Thanks for everything you do. We inspire the next generation of environmentalists through our National Schools programme. So again, a huge hello and thank you to any of our Young Tree Champions who are watching today, and also any of our teachers who are really instrumental in inspiring our Young Tree Champions as well. We use practical science and research, and we do this so that we can influence national policy and support better practice for trees and the environment. And we harness the power of working collectively and partnership working with our amazing partnership organisations to hopefully create a healthy and tree-filled future. So our session today is part of the Life on the Hedge project. And this project, it's all about raising awareness of how amazing our hedgerows are, all they do for us. And we hope by doing this, we can create better connected hedgerows all across the UK and promote better hedgerow management. To do this, we're funded through the Trees Call to Action Fund, and this is a national fund developed by DEFRA and Forestry Commission, and it's delivered through the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So, moving on to the talk. These webinars are all about growing trees in order to be able to plant them. But why do we do this? Why should we plant trees? Can anyone put any suggestion of why we might want to plant trees? Pop them in the chat box now. So we've got a few suggestions popping in now. We've got climate change, absolutely. Climate adaptation. Carbon, yes, absolutely. We've got joy, absolutely. We do plant trees for the joy of them. Ecosystem services, absolutely. Ecosystem services is just another term that we use for the benefits you get from trees, and that covers everything from climate to our well-being. Good for animals, absolutely. There's loads of reasons why we might want to plant trees. They store carbon and help us fight and adapt to changing climates. They act as habitat for wildlife. They can help prevent flooding by intercepting water and slowing that flow, stopping water getting into our streams and our rivers, so stopping flooding that way. They can help improve air quality and water quality in our urban areas especially. They promote our soil health. They're really important for our soil health, making sure that we have a good microcosm of organisms within the soil. They provide shelter and shade, not just for us, but also for wild animals and more domestic animals and farm animals as well. They make us feel better. So if somebody put in, we plant them for joy, and absolutely they do. They make us feel better. They improve our well-being, and we also get absolutely loads of things from them. The desk that I'm sat at is made out of wood. The paper we write on is made out of wood. There's timber in our houses and our buildings. The list goes on and on. So we know why we need to plant them. But why should we grow our own trees and not just go down to a local tree nursery or garden centre to get them? Before we go into this, I think it's good to mention that commercial nurseries are amazing places, and they should absolutely be a source for top quality plants and expertise. That is the expertise that they are able to give, and the excellent quality plants is amazing. So growing our own trees should be seen as an adjunct to, rather than a replacement of going to our tree nurseries. Both ways of sourcing trees has got its place. So to start off, very importantly, why should we grow trees ourselves? Well, first of all, it's really fun. It's a fantastic thing to do. It's really enjoyable. It connects us to nature. It connects us to this process of growing trees. And if we do it with other people, it connects to each other. And this process of being connected to nature and to each other, nurturing something living, is amazing for both our mental and physical health. It's a great way to learn new skills. It's a really environmentally friendly way of getting your trees. Not only are they going to store carbon and act as habitat when they grow up, but because you're not shipping trees in from elsewhere, it can kind of reduce the carbon footprint of your tree planting project. So it's a really good way to do it. It's an environmentally friendly way to do it. As trees have grown from seed that you've probably likely collected from the local area, it means that they are probably suited to your local conditions. Your trees will be well suited to the kind of environmental conditions you have in that area, which means that when you plant them where you want to in the local area, they're probably more likely to survive, because the parent trees from where you've collected the seed, they're already used to being in that area. Now, if you're used to the word biosecurity, it's just a techie term for how we do things to prevent the spread of pests and disease. This could be a tree pest and disease. It's all very basic things. We've all been through the COVID pandemic, so we do know the principles already. And what we go and the way that we're now connected with the whole world through shipping and things is fantastic. And global trade is an amazing thing. But we've also seen a huge increase in the number of our tree pests and diseases as a consequence. So things like ash dieback, which we've got at the moment, we think came from global trade. So by growing local trees and minimizing travel from where a tree is sourced to where it's planted, by the very virtue of being really not moving very far, trees can help biosecurity. And there's loads of other ways you can be more biosecure when growing trees, which we can cover, and we will cover in other sessions. And finally, we can help local and national tree planting efforts. So government targets currently stand at 30,000 hectares a year over the next 30 years. So, but 30,000 hectares, what is that? I mean, to put that into perspective, an international football pitch, a full-size footy pitch, is just under a hectare. So if you can imagine over 30,000 international-sized football pitches being planted up with trees every single year for the next 30 years, it's a huge amount of trees. And it's been suggested recently that these targets being so large, we're struggling to meet them. So growing our own trees can help take some of the stresses off professional and commercial tree nurseries, but also through the process of connecting people with the tree growing process and planting with the communities. It's been shown that tree planting projects survive better, and obviously you get the added benefits of local people being involved with tree planting projects. But what is a community tree nursery? And before we answer this, a poll should pop up now. And could you please just answer, do you know what a community tree nursery is? Yes or no? That'll be really helpful for us to be able to gauge people's understanding of what community tree nurseries are. And when we do that, that means that we'll be able to it means we can better help community tree nurseries get out there into the public and get people involved with them. So results are coming in now, and just over half are, it looks say they don't know what a community tree nursery is, and they just under half is yes. So that's really, really good information for us to know. Thank you so much. Well, a community tree nursery encompasses loads and loads of different things. Essentially, they're passionate people who grow trees themselves, and they come in a huge range of different sizes and types. So they could be an individuals growing trees in their back garden. You know, you could grow it in one pot or in one bed. It could be schools growing trees in their grounds. It could be a group of local volunteers. We have tree warden networks all over the UK, and many of them are involved in not just tree planting, but actually tree growing as well. So tree wardens could be community tree nurseries, could be local charities growing trees to sell, could be a social enterprise developing employability training for young people. You know, it really ranges from somebody growing a tree in a pot all the way through to these larger scale community tree nurseries, or CTNs, that work in a similar way to large scale professional nurseries. You know, they're fully self-sustaining, and they sell thousands of trees a year. But most importantly, it could be you. I think anyone can get involved with tree growing, and all of it helps our tree planting efforts. A lot of the community tree nurseries out there, their model and the way they operate is often based on their purpose. Everyone wants to plant trees for different reasons, and that, you know, we need to think about what drives us to be able to plant trees, and then that can help us decide what model we want to go down. So they often reflect the purpose, and a lot of them perform lots and lots of different purposes. But if we give a few examples, to name a few, it could be a community working together, growing trees in an allotment site in response to local climate or environmental issues. You might think, okay, how can we all come together and grow trees to be able to plant out? It could be a collective of growers growing trees in their back gardens. It could be a whole street coming together and said, look, if we all club together and put some extra trees in our local street, in our gardens, we can improve the habitat for our neighborhood wildlife. It could be a group specializing in specific species. You know, there are species out there of tree which are locally rare or aren't commonly available through some nurseries. So it could be people getting together and thinking, okay, well, we're going to grow those species to be able to plant those out. They might do that in a section of the local park that the local authority has let them have. It could be a school or youth group growing trees for an outdoor space where they'll tend to them and they'll nurture them and learn in. It could be a social enterprise giving people the skills to go on and get jobs in related areas, and this could be in the corner of a farmer's field with permission or something like that. You know, and there's lots and lots of different models. It could be a social group for anyone who might benefit from horticultural therapy, working in the grounds of an old historic property's walled garden, which they've allowed them to use. There's loads of different models, and they all kind of work in different ways. But before we look at what community tree nurseries needs to do to grow trees, it's important to remind ourselves of the natural life cycle of most of our trees. So let's think about it in a circle. So what we're going to talk about here is temperate trees. So in the UK, we're part of Northern Europe. So we have very distinct seasons. Now, for the eagle-eyed amongst you today, you might notice that across the next few pictures that come up, they are different tree species, so they're not meant to all work perfectly together. They are for artistic purposes. But we have distinct seasons here in the UK, and they are really, really, really important in the life cycle of a tree. So we start off with a mature tree. And in spring and summer, these mature trees produce flowers, which are then in turn pollinated. You can see a bee on this blossom here. They're pollinated by insects and birds and things. And in the autumn, then tree seeds are produced. Now, when we talk about seeds today, we could mean all manner of things. Seeds come in different shapes and forms. It could be a berry like you see here, could be a nut, could be something like an acorn, could be a fruit. Think about apples and pears. It could be a winged seed. So think of something like a field maple or a sycamore. It could be a cone, something like a Scots pine. Lots of different ways. So when we're talking about seeds today, we're going to be talking about any of those things. So in autumn, tree seeds are produced, and these generally either fall to the ground or are planted by animals. So if you think about our acorns, a lot of our wild acorns are planted by jays, one of our bird species. So and other things like berries are eaten by birds. Think of thrushes and blackbirds. They will eat things like hawthorn berries, which you can see here, and then they'll pass through the bird and they'll poop them out, and those seeds then go onto the floor. And this happens in winter. And these once the tree seed has fallen, they then lie dormant either on the surface or in the kind of upper part of the soil over winter. Now, this is a really, really important part of the cycle, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But it's this period of cold which is essential to trigger growth in spring. So in the spring, seeds germinate and begin to grow as sprouts. They set roots down and begin to develop young leaves. And then across the summer, seeds then become seedlings and grow on to become saplings. And over time, saplings become mature. It might take a few years, and eventually you end up with a mature tree which is capable of reproduction. So around and round it goes. But how do we reproduce nature's cycle for our own tree growing and planting projects? Well, community tree nurseries mimic this process and care for their trees to give them the best chance in life. So let's look at this little table, which I've pinched from the fantastic Young Tree Growers Guide. So a lot of the graphics that you'll see today are from the Young Tree Growers Guide, which we'll talk about in a bit. But they're amazing for providing a really nice, easy to follow overview of many of the processes we're talking about today. So you can see here that there is a calendar of events that we might do to grow trees from seed, and how and the activities that we do fit into the life cycle. So to help us with this calendar of events, we have a calendar of helpful online talks like this one to help you along your journey. Starting today in January, so with Getting Sowing. But our next talk is on the 26th of March, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that in a moment. But we'll send a link around to this when we ping the recording round of this talk, and keep an eye on our socials for more details of when all of these talks are going to be and who's going to be there. And links to our various social media channels should be popping into the chat now, so have a little look on there. So today's session, a bit of an overview of the whole process and introducing the concept of community tree nurseries and what resources we have in to help. So let's start with the beginning of the tree growing activities. First of all, we have the berries, fruits, nuts, cones of trees falling to the ground. This generally occurs in the autumn time from September to December, and we can go out into our parks, our gardens, local woodlands and hedgerows and gather seed. Like I say, using seed for all manner of things, berries, fruit, winged seeds, and collect seed. Now, here we generally only collect what we need, and we need to do this in order to allow plenty for wildlife. So we don't want to go out and absolutely rinse a tree and take absolutely everything off it. We only take what we need, really. So in order to be able to do that, we need to think about how many trees and of what species we might want to grow. So it's a great time to plan your future tree planting projects. You could look at an area and think, okay, I need 50 trees for that area. I want this many species. And it will let you go out and be able to choose what you need to grow in advance. We then have this, so once we've collected our seed, we then have this period in nature where seeds are either on or in the ground, and they go through this period of extended cold over the winter months. And this is really essential to break the dormancy of the seed. Now, the dormancy is just a fancy word of saying when something is not active. And in the case of tree seed in this country and in lots of parts across Northern Europe, it needs this cold phase in order to wake the seed up to begin germinating, to begin growing. So this happens in the depths of winter, and what we can do here is plant. We can plant directly some of our seeds like acorns and beech nuts and sweet chestnuts. These are already kind of raring to go. They're some of the bigger tree seeds, and that is the size of the nut or something like an acorn. The bigger ones, their size is their source of energy, so they quite often don't need additional treatment. You can just plant those directly and they'll go. But other species like rowan, hawthorn, holly really need this extended cold period, otherwise they won't germinate. So what we do is that we call this stratifying our seeds. Stratifying is just a fancy word of saying we make sure that they've got cold enough so that they know when the temperatures rise in spring, they're like, okay, we're good to go, it's spring. And some seeds won't germinate straight away. So to make sure we don't waste space by planting all our seeds that might need to be stratified, we often put them all together in a bag or a bucket of compost and grit over the winter to let them get cold and germinate. But it's worth noting that some species like yew and holly might take a couple of years to germinate. So when collecting seeds, it's always worth getting a variety of tree seeds that germinate in one season and beyond, just to avoid any disappointment in the spring when you've left them over winter and nothing's germinating. And we can do tricks such as putting tree seeds in fridges, which are a very constant low temperature, and that can kind of trick them and speed up this process. But we talk about that in these online masterclasses that we've had over the last couple of months. So if you want to learn more about this stage of the process, have a little look on our YouTube channel. So our first couple of talks have already happened during seed gathering season, and they're available to watch on YouTube. There should be a link dropping into the chat now, which takes you to all our past seed gathering tree growing videos. So yeah, these covered the seed collection part and what we must do to stratify them. So remember, it's really important, this stratifying part for many species. We also covered some of the biosecurity basics about when collecting seeds. Really, really basic things such as just simply making note of exactly where you collected your seeds so that you've got traceability should you spot any pests or diseases in them when they're growing. But more on that later. Okay. So for seeds that only need one winter to germinate, then they do so in the early spring. And we can then, around March, take the germinating seeds out of their bags or buckets and plant them into either pots, root trainers, which are just tall, narrow pots, or into the ground or raised beds. So coming up on the 26th of March, we have Healthy Happy Trees, where we will outline what you might want to think about when creating your own little tree nursery, talk a little bit more about the importance of biosecurity when growing trees, and we'll outline what you can do with your germinating seeds at this time of year if you're not at this stage yet. So this is around March. Our seedlings, once they've germinated and they've got going, now really just need our help to keep them alive and growing until they're ready and they're big enough to be able to plant out. So this can take quite a long time and tends to happen over the spring and summer months for fast-growing species, but it might take a couple of years for slower-growing species. But to keep them healthy and happy, tree growers need to regularly water their young plants during dry spells, and also think about feeding them with organic fertilizer and things to speed up their growth. But during this time, we need to think about keeping them away from things that might want to munch them. This could be things like rabbits, deer, squirrels, mice, depending on where you are, things like caterpillars. Lots of different things like to eat young trees. So during this stage, we might need to think about protecting them in some way. And Matt, who we'll speak to in a little bit, has had some teething problems with that in the past, which he can tell you about. So this is generally from April to October. This is that peak period where what we need to do is keep our trees alive and happy. So in June, we have our Tree Talk Growing Up, which will look at what you can do to keep your young trees happy during these summer months when they grow. And this will range from watering and thwarting pests to weeding and feeding, all the things you need to think about. And then once large enough, we can then think about planting them out in their final homes. Now we need to think about a few things here. So we do this in the autumn and winter months, as this is when our trees have drawn all their energy down into their roots to store it, ready for growth in spring. And we can now plant our trees out where they're intended to grow. If you haven't got that far, if you've grown some trees and you don't know where you intend to plant them, and you just thought you'd do a bit of an experiment, that's fine. And what is good to do around this time is to link up with local tree planting projects, find local tree planting projects that might accept our trees. And once they're planted, then we need to give them the best kind of start in life and the love and care they need to be able to flourish in their new home. So our final couple of talks, Place of Their Own and Leaving Home in September and December, we'll look at how you can find and choose the best final homes for your trees, as well as how to move them, and some tips for their aftercare to give them a fighting chance and to be able to grow up healthily. So this will cover from about November to April. So the end of tree planting season, it tends to be around April, with changing climates and our springs getting warmer and our autumns getting warmer. Our tree planting window seems to be getting a bit smaller and smaller. So the ideal time to plant trees generally is kind of December, January, February, just into March. But you can do it across all those kind of colder months. So there's a lot to get your head around here, but we have various things that to help you guide you, as well as our online talks. If you prefer something that you can look at in your own time, we also have 2 fantastic online resources available for you, offering tree growing guidance at different levels of where you're up to on your tree growing journey. So we've got the Tree Growers Guide and the Young Tree Growers Guide. So the Young Tree Growers Guide is a recent beginner's version of the Tree Growers Guide and was produced in partnership with Hampshire County Council and Hampshire Forest Partnership. Like I said, a lot of the fantastic graphics throughout this presentation are from the guide. And there's a link going into the chat now of how you can access it. So please do use it. Even if you've already got some experience of growing trees, it sets out the whole process in such an understandable and nice way. It's really easy to get your head around. So it's an online guide, what it has is it's got 40 learning resources and lesson plans looking at all the different stages you need, from why we need trees, what the importance of trees, thinking about planning ahead, where do we want to plant our trees, how many trees, how many species do we need. Has a bit on the science of how and why trees produce different types of seeds and the different types of process that you might need to go through to get them ready to germinate. And then it's got a great section on how to gather seed, how you can sow seed and get them germinating and growing, and then how and where you can plant your tree, as well as looking at caring for your tree. So there's loads of things you can look at there. For a more detailed version, the Tree Growers Guide is an update to the Good Seed Guide, and was put together through a collaboration of More Trees, which is a fantastic community tree nursery down in Devon, Cornwall Council, Norfolk Council, and ourselves, the Tree Council. So this is available either as a free extended online version or a shortened hard copy, which is available to buy from our website. And there should be a link in the chat now. It's a great guide, as it not only outlines what you need to be able to collect and grow seeds, but it's also got a really, really useful tree and seed identification part. And one of the reasons why it's so useful is that it not only lets you see identify different species, but it tells you when exactly you need to go and collect the seed, and also some of the different specifics about each of the different species. It'll tell you if your species can be planted directly, if it needs to be stratified, and tells you when you should stratify or put your seeds through this cold period, and for how long. And it does that for lots of different species. So in the hard guide, there's a lot of species, but in the online version, there's even more species to look at. So we look at tree seed ID, but it's also got an amazing section on how to set up a community tree nursery. So if you're interested in setting up a fully fledged community tree nursery and taking your tree growing to the next level, there's it kind of states out how you should do that. And there's also a recent addition to it, which is a series of case studies from community tree nurseries who have done this process, and kind of gives you the do's and don'ts of everything that they went through in order to get where they are today. So if you'd like to grow trees from seed, you might want to go it alone and just give it a try and follow the guides and online talks. But for support, and if you want to join an existing community tree nursery, how can we find our nearest one? Well, there's quite a lot of different places that you could look, really. Like I say, many of our tree wardens are involved in community growing projects. So if you wanted to find if you had a tree warden network near you, you can go onto our website and find your nearest tree warden network. If you haven't got a tree warden network, I would also urge you to go out there and set one up. And there's more details on our website, and a link to our tree warden network page should be dropping in now. But they're often involved in amazing community growing projects, and you can potentially go and help out there. But it ranges from all different groups. So it could be a friends of group of your local park. If you go to your local park at the weekend and you see people working there, volunteering, speak to them. They might know of some local projects. Speak to your local council. They're likely to know through their parks and tree teams who are involved in CTM work. So speak to your local council. Community forests are potentially another good avenue. So community forests are a series of charities all across the UK, and they cover generally quite large areas of the UK. So have a little look on the community forest trust website to see if there's a community forest near you. Many charities like wildlife trusts are involved in CTNs. So if you've got a local wildlife trust, contact them. If you're within a school, if you attend a school or you teach at a school, maybe look at other schools near you. Maybe there are schools who you could link in with who are already doing this kind of work. And the kind of the best place you can go to find all knowledge is people who are doing it already. And there is a fantastic network called the Community Tree Nursery Collaborative. And what they are, it's a collective of loads of community tree nurseries and individuals all over the UK who are all passionate about growing trees. So it's headed up by a few different community tree nurseries. So that's the Fellowship of the Trees, Code and FAC, More Trees, Special Branch, and the Tree Musketeers. And they offer a peer-to-peer learning network, and they've got loads and loads of expertise and knowledge and experience that you can pick the brains of. They've got loads of webinars on their YouTube channel, and they also run talks every other month on everything community tree nursery, really. So their Facebook page is where you go to speak to them, and that's how they operate. Should be a link dropping into the chat now to go to their Facebook page. But it would be a great place to ask any questions about either getting involved in a tree growing movement near you, or if you how to set it up yourself. On their Facebook page as well, they do have a interactive map which shows where a lot of the community tree nurseries are all over the country, but they're not all on there. So it's a great place to be able to go and ask. That would be my first port of call. And funny enough, they have a webinar this evening for anyone who wants to learn more about how to set up a community tree nursery. So if you want to learn from the pros about how to set up a community tree nursery, please do sign up for this event tonight. So it's on tonight from 7 to 8:30, and there should be a link dropping into the chat now. So please do have a look on their Eventbrite page. That's where you can register. 7 to 8:30 tonight. Please do go along, and they'll introduce you to a really great bunch of people who are all out there already doing this, and they're always really willing to give their advice. So please do go there. But that's enough of me waffling on now. So thank you for listening to my part of the session. But what we're going to do now is that we'll go over to Matt Knight, who is head of ecology at Shinfield St Mary's in Reading. He's founder of the fruit tree charity Freely Fruity, and he's one of our own Young Tree Champion regional leads. So, hello, Matt. How you doing?
Hi there, Will. I'm very well, thank you. I just thought I might mention as well, a lot of questions have come out about the links. There will be an email. Don't worry, if you can't copy and paste them, we will be emailing them. So I've seen that come
Yeah,
up.
absolutely.
It does. The questions are coming in so quickly. I think they're superseding each other, and people can't keep up. So yeah,
That's fine.
they will be coming out. Okay, so let's have a little look at my school then, I guess. So the first slide.
Mm, there we go.
There we go. Okay, so Shinfield St Mary's, our journey started 2015. I guess I actually started working there in 2012. It's a bit of a slow burner for a few years, but it really got going in 2015. Without boring you too much, just a few of the things we have there. We've got 24 raised beds where the children are taught how to grow their own produce. We've got artificial streams, we've got biodomes, we've got hugelkultures, and yeah, so lots and lots of different stuff going on there at the moment. But recently, obviously, we've been involved with the Tree Council, and that's been the last 2 years. So as you can see, the top right-hand side there, that's a Miyawaki forest that has been planted in the last 6 months. Over 2,000 trees, absolutely amazing. But since then, we've now moved forward from that, and we've now become a community tree nursery. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what it is that we've done at our school. So hopefully give you some ideas as well. So the next slide, please, Will. Okay, so yes, so as you were probably aware, we've already done a seminar on what to grow, where to find the seeds, but very, very briefly, all of our seeds that we grow in our own school are collected on our own properties or within the local community area. As some of you have already pointed out, that it's really quite important for the provenance of your trees to make sure that you're growing local trees, obviously with tree diseases and other things like that, keeping the trees local. We're really, really fortunate in our school. We've got about 57 different species of tree. Most were there when I got there, to be honest. And we can collect a lot of seeds there. What helped us the most, undoubtedly, if you haven't already done this, please do download the Tree Growers Guide. Okay, the email will go out and tell you where to get that, but it is absolutely amazing. Literally covers, it's not that I'm saying I'm an idiot, but it's an idiot's guide to tree growing. It covers just about everything you'll need to know on your journey. So yeah, if we go to the next one, please, Will. Okay, resources. This is, if you're in a school like myself or any community kind of group, this is probably the most difficult thing to start with. Obviously, most people won't have to hand all the tools, all the pots, the compost, even to get going. It can be a bit daunting when you first start out. My advice would probably be is start small, depending if you have the budget for it. But we certainly did start small. We were given lots of pots from local residents. We had a few tools, and we had a bag of compost, and that's all we started with. Since we've got going, I think the important thing that we've learned is that to be kind of self-sufficient. So now we produce our own compost on site. So all of the waste products that we have from our raised beds are used in our composting. We try to do no dig as well, so that does help out with that. We also use all of the fruit waste that we have at break times. We compost that. We have worm farms, so we have some really quality good compost. And then aside from that, we approached our local waste company, which is RE3 in our area, and they quite often have free compost for charities, schools, and so we regularly get stuff off of them. For the tools, again, we've over the years sold plants, grown them on to try and raise some funds, and we've got quite a good little stock of tools now. So we've done pretty well with that. So, but the start, I think the resources is the key to that. If you can get hold of these resources, even if they're secondhand, it really doesn't matter. You probably do want to sterilize them, depending on what it is you were doing. I think Phil will go into that a bit more detail when we're talking about sectors and stuff. But for pots and things like that, as long as you're using fresh compost, you're not likely to have any problems. You can go on, please, Will. Okay, so in our school, there are obviously several methods for growing trees, as you're probably aware, most of you. Your main choice is in the ground or in pots. At the moment, 90% of ours are in pots or in root trainers. We just don't really have the space, I guess, to a lot of plastic. There is a lot of plastic. There's not getting away from that. But unfortunately, as you'll find in this business, there are alternatives, but they cost money. And obviously, people giving us things, I'm obviously very sustainable minded, but it's better to reuse and recycle than it is to buy something brand new. So yeah, I get that point, but yeah, you actually need to start from somewhere. So and we often have this discussion with plastic free home and think it would be ideal if we didn't use any plastic. And again, yeah, you can use tin cans, but with the numbers we're talking, when you have 500, that's 500 tin cans. But anyway, we're moving on. So yeah, you can have the different variations of growing these. And as Will was talking about earlier, the nut method. Now, I found over the years that if you place the nut straight into the soil, most of them might germinate, they might not. You're going to get several problems with rot, with fungus gnat, and all host of different other things going on. I found that actually the most beneficial way to get them going is to put them in leaf mulch, which is to literally collect the leaves from the fallen trees and we place them into there, stratify them over the winter, and then come spring, a good 80% of those will germinate, and we can then pot those on. The aces and other things like that, they tend to go straight into the root trainers. Then move on, please, Will. Okay, so this is my willing army of digging volunteers. So as you can see, there's some of the compost we've got from our local RE3 waste producers. Again, once we get to this stage, as you can see on the right-hand side, in those trays, which we picked up from food banks, they've germinated. We want to get them out there as quickly as you possibly can. So then it's a case of placing them in 2 pots, trays, or into the ground, depending on what you're going to be doing with them. But generally speaking, we place ours into recycled plant pots, which we've got from community members in the local area. Go on, please, Will. Thank you. Okay, now this is kind of, I saw somebody mention early on about, the management of this and making sure you look at it before you start planting. And this was maybe 3 years ago. And what we found was that near enough every single horse chestnut germinated, which left us with about 400 horse chestnut trees. Now, it turns out that not too many people want horse chestnut trees. So this is what really my big advice to you is really think about where you're going to be putting these trees, who's going to be taking these trees. There's no point just growing lots of trees if there's no homes for them. I have now found homes for these, but it was quite an arduous process to find homes for these. Whereas things like hawthorns, the damsons, and all the stuff, the blackthorn, the quickthorn, rowan, all the rest of them, generally find homes for those very, very quickly. People like to plant the hedgerow type trees much more than they do the monstrous horse chestnuts. We can move on, please, Will. Okay, so this is our tree nursery in Shinfield. Again, we were donated everything that's in this shot. So some of the old staging that's come from a cellar before that's now stopped the business. And so we used that, get them off the ground. And it's a case of trying to use your space as best as you can. Obviously, being a school, there is only a finite amount of space. So we've decided to put this shelving in, and it actually got around 400 to 500 trees currently in pots on this staging. So it's quite compact for the space that we have. Yeah, so here we have this is our Miyawaki forest. Again, I know lots of plastic. It's the ongoing battle, and I'm not gonna lie. We struggle with this. It's just a pure cost issue, I think, and what's available. So these were donated to us. They've been reused from previous tree growing projects from the council. We're reusing them rather than getting thrown away. So yes, they are plastic. But for my view, it protects our tree saplings from local deer and rabbits. It's got to be a good thing for what I'm using them for. Go on to the next one, please. Well, okay, this is probably the biggest thing I learned from my time now doing this. This is our second season of doing this fully, I guess. And we've had massive problems with wildlife. Now, the way you want to look at this, I guess the wildlife is having an absolute field day, loving it, living the dream. We've got a mouse, I swear, in my greenhouse in school that is so fat, I'm not even sure how he even gets out of the greenhouse. But yeah, where we were stratifying our seeds, the greenhouse, for all intents and purposes, looks sealed. But as you'll be aware, rodents, they get absolutely everywhere. So we got a little family that moved in, and he carefully worked his way through all of our hazelnuts and acorns, chestnuts, just started noshing his way through everything. Luckily, we caught him quite early on, so we were able to move somewhere else. And it is really, really difficult to proof these from wildlife. They will get in the tiniest of holes. So I think you have to accept that you will lose a certain quota to animals, and just I this year I just collected more than I needed, knowing full well that I was going to lose some to nature. The birds as well, they absolutely love to dig up these seeds, and also my saplings as well. This is partly why we need the tree guards. They will pull them out of the ground and look for the grubs which are underneath them. Very, very clever, the corvids. So quite difficult to go against. And again, we use things like chicken wire if we have it, plastic mesh, if that's tree guards that's been given the recycled against plastic. It's not ideal, but it is the way it is. Bigger problems, I think, is rot. I noticed our first year we lost a lot of our nut seeds because we placed it straight into the ground, and it rained so much that the compost just became sodden, and that really encouraged the mold growth in there. And then we got the fungus gnat, and before you know it, you've lost half your tree crop. So it's about keeping it moist but not waterlogged. And now, as a tree nursery, we have the main hub is our school, and then we have 2 secondaries and 2 primaries at the moment, who are our feeder schools. They collect seeds, they have the basic equipment to grow those on, and any trees that they don't want in their school come back to our school, and then we feed those out to local schools. And we've already sent out 120 saplings, and I think next week there'll be another 60 going out to a local school. So brilliant stuff. It's really great to share those with the community. Next slide, please, Will. Okay, community partners. Again, this would be my top tip. There is a lot of this at the minute. It's coming out after COVID, especially people wanting to get their employees out there and helping. We are near Reading, so we have lots and lots of big corporations around us, Microsoft, Virgin, you name it, they're around us. So they have some really great schemes where they volunteer to come out, and I would say use that. It's literally go out there, speak to people. At the end of the day, as I was talking to somebody yesterday, the worst that can happen is they will say no, and that's it. You just keep going. And I've learned that from my own charity, and that is that if you ask enough times, eventually somebody will say yes. And this 2,000 tree Miyawaki forest would not have happened had it have not been obviously for the Tree Council initially providing the trees, and then for Virgin Media, O2, and all of these different companies coming in, helping our 360 children, which is a large number of children. But there's some heavy shifting required when you're building or planting a forest such as a Miyawaki. So it's really, really important. Make sure you speak to parents, local neighbours, get as many different people involved as you can. The Miyawaki forest. I think I've just seen a question. I can answer that one straight off the bat. So a Miyawaki forest is named after a Japanese botanist called Akira Miyawaki. That's spelled M-I-Y-A-K-I. No, sorry, M-I-Y-W-A-K-I. We'll put it out in the email afterwards. But it's effectively a method of preparing the ground so that the trees will grow much quicker. And there's going to be a whole presentation just on that, so I'll leave it at that. But if you look up Akira Miyawaki online, or even in this country, tiny forest is another term which is bounded about And there's plenty of things on YouTube. If you watch those, it'll tell you everything you would possibly need to know. Thank you, Will.
All right, thank you so much, Matt. That was really interesting. I'm conscious of time, so I think what we'll do is that we'll go through to Phil's section, and then we're going to come on to the question and answers, where we can talk about any questions that have been posted in the question and answer. But thank you so much, Matt. Yeah, brilliant, and I think inspirational for how people can be resourceful in getting things which have already been used, and making it work in their school grounds, wherever. Okay, so it's now time for our jobs for the weekend. So hopefully this section will give you something that you can go away and do this very weekend. And for this, Phil Powell, who is our head of major tree planting projects, and he's our kind of propagation whiz for the Tree Council, has prepared a video for you how you can easily go about propagating your own trees from cuttings. So what we've talked about today is growing trees from seed, but it's not the only way that you can grow trees. So what I'll do is I'll stop sharing the screen here, and we will move over to the video.
Hi there, I'm Phil from the Tree Council, and I've been asked by my colleague Will to just talk to you a little bit about propagating trees by vegetative means from hardwood cuttings. So this time of year is ideal for producing some hardwood cuttings, and some of the suitable plants. I've got some willow here, so I've got some really nice hybrid willow. So I've got a really nice red basket tree willow here. Now plants like willow and cornus propagate really easily, so they're ideal to do from hardwood cuttings. When you're thinking about a hardwood cutting, obviously you've got different types of material here on the tree. So the material that you've got at the end is generally the softwood, halfway down semi-ripe, and then as you move further down the cutting starts to get a bit more woody. That's what we call the hardwood. So generally the hardwood is the growth that was put down in the previous year. So that will be the most suitable material for a hardwood cutting. And what we're looking for ideally material that's about the same sort of thickness as a pencil. So around about pencil thickness. Now this is a really nice example. We've got a couple of different willows here. So we've got a couple of different lovely coloured basket tree willows. And then I've got another hybrid here that's called Nordica, which is actually great for shelter belts or biomass firewood production as well. So a couple of different types, and again they all propagate really readily. All of the plants that we've got here, this is actually from a little willow coppice that I manage, and so all of the growth that we've got here, this is 2 years growth. So you can see the different varieties will put on a different amount of growth each year. But this nice red hybrid, that gives you a nice example of the source of growth that you can expect over a couple of years with some willow. And again, this will produce a really nice selection of cuttings for us to propagate on. So I'm just going to show you the process of taking a hardwood cutting. So ideally, we're looking at this sort of material down at the bottom here. This is our hardened off wood. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to nip off all of our lateral shoots from the cutting there, okay, from our rod. Okay, and I'm going to remove this little curve on the ends because ideally we want some nice straight cuttings. So I'm going to do a nice straight cut on the bottom there. Always important to try and have a nice sharp pair of suckers when you're working, and do try and sterilize your suckers as well between working on different plants, particularly when you're doing propagation work. It just helps to stop the spread of infection when you're working. So we've got our hardwood section here, and we're looking for a section that's round about 6 inches. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to follow up on what you've actually got on your cutting, where you've got a bud that comes out, or a shoot that comes out. That's what we call the node, and the section in between is called the internode. And what we're looking to do, we're looking to cut off just below a bud, because that's going to actually root for us, and then we're looking to go round about 5 to 6 inches of cutting. Okay, so I've just cut that section there. And what I've done a nice little sloping cut across the top there. So I've done a sloping cut away from the bud at the top, so then if any rainwater comes, that will run away from the bud and stop any infection getting in. So that's a great example of a hardwood cutting there. And what we can do, we can just work our way along. So again, I'm going to come and I'm going to find a bottom bud, and then I'm going to do a nice straight cut under that bottom bud. I want something approximately the same length, and then I'm going to come up and I'm going to do a sloping cut on top of the other bud. So if you have a look there, you can see I've got a nice sloping cut, and my bud is going to grow away in this direction. So I've got a couple of cuttings there ready to go. And what we can do, so what we would normally do when we're producing hardwood cuttings like this, is we would work along and we'd produce a nice bunch of cuttings. And generally you can put those into maybe a bundle of 25 or a bundle of 50, and you can either pop them into a pot, and they can grow on there and root, or you could potentially line them out in a cutting bed. So you could line them out in the ground and allow them to root in situ. So we're doing this before the plants come into growth. So we're in the dormant season at the moment. And what I generally do, I'd either leave them in a container, bundled, or I'd put them in the ground. I'd leave them in for the whole growing season. So I'd leave those in situ until we start coming into the autumn and the trees start moving towards dormancy. And then if I lift those cuttings up, so either take them out of the pot or lift them out of the ground, you should find that you've got a nicely rooted cutting, and where it's been below soil level, you'd have all of your roots developing. So when we're going to sink these into our pot, we would generally put them about halfway down into the soil level. So this part of the cutting would be in the ground, that would be above, and then all of this section would hopefully root for us into the ground. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you some cuttings that were taken last year to give you a little bit of an idea about how they should look once they've rooted.
Rolling.
Welcome back. So you can see since I was last been to you, I've been quite busy, and I've been actually preparing cuttings from all of that nice red hybrid willow. And you see I've kind of divided them down into different sizes. So what we've got here, we've got some 2-year-old material. So you can see obviously it's slightly thicker and a slightly different coloration to the bark of the willow. So this is wood that was put down 2 years ago. We've got 1-year-old hardwood material. So this is ideal. So this is our ideal material for a hardwood cutting, and it's, again, as I said, it's ideally round about pencil thickness. And then we've also got this softer stuff. So this is, this is the end of the tips from this growing season. So generally this is what we would be calling our softwood. It's not as woody. Rather than wasting this, so this isn't ideal for hardwood cuttings, but what I generally like to do is I will soak this in water, and it normally roots quite readily when it's soaked in water, and then you can then plant up those individual plants afterwards. So rather than wasting it, but I mean, you could use it for a little project. Obviously quite nice, it's got some catkins on it, so quite nice for an arrangement in the house. But again, you can make use of all that material as well. It will root if soaked into water. So as I mentioned, your options are, with our willows here, we could potentially bundle that group into a nice bundle like that, and then plant all of those together into a single pot, and then allow that to root over the season. Or we could line that up in a cutting bed and to allow it to root in the ground. Generally, if you're putting your willow cuttings into the ground, you'll normally have better growth. So if you're producing an actual willow bed rather than in a container, you'll generally get a lot more growth within the season than if they're containerised. So obviously you've got a lot more room for the cuttings to spread their roots out if they're individually planted rather than planted in a cluster. So again, I think it's quite good if you can divide them down into those different particular sizes. You're going to get very, very similar growth, and it'll make it a lot easier for you to sort them next season when you lift them out. So that kind of shows you the preparation techniques. What we're going to do now is we'll have a little look at some willow that was planted up last year. So here we've got an example of some willow that I did the same process with last year. So again, you can see it's been submerged into a nice container. I've used a kind of a mixture of soil and compost there, rather than compost alone, because it'd be very good for holding the moisture, so you don't have to water it so much and it won't dry out. And again, you can see we've got a nice clump of cuttings there, maybe around about 20 cuttings, and then you can see that we've got all of this growth that was put on by the cuttings over the last year. So that's a good indication that they potentially rooted and they're establishing well. You can see that we might have some cuttings that are browning off and have died off, so you don't always get 100% success rate. So that's why it's quite good to do them in quantity, because it might be from any batch that you do, you may only get a 70 to 80% success rate with some of the cuttings not taking successfully. And again, I mean, with these hardwood cuttings, with things like the willow that we're using today, dogwood as well, so cornice or dogwood, or things like currants, they root so easily that you don't need to use any rooting gel or rooting hormone with them. You can literally pop the cuttings straight in, whereas with some other types of tree or shrub, you might want to use a little bit of rooting hormone just to encourage that growth. So I've just separated some of those cuttings, and if you have a look here, you can see this is one of our willow cuttings with the new growth on top, and you can see it's established a really nice selection of root there. So everywhere where the cutting has been below ground, so within the soil, it's put up a really nice root system into that area. So what we can do now, we can either plant this this willow cutting in situ. So if we're going to plant it within a scheme somewhere, it will happily grow away there, or we could repot that up individually. So again, from a CTM perspective, it might be that you want to grow this on in a slightly larger pot, and then that could be available for use in a local planting project or available for sale. So just to finish off, I just wanted to show you some cuttings laid out in a nice cutting bed here that I prepared earlier. So again, as mentioned, we want to make sure that our cuttings are kind of sunk in half of their depth into the soil, and always make sure that you've got your sloping cut at the top and your flat cut at the bottom. That makes sure that you've got your cutting the right way up, and it's going to grow away nice and easily in position. So you can see this is a relatively good spacing for our cuttings. They don't want to be too close together. That will allow them to put down a nice section of root. And what I do to finish this off is I just put around a nice wood chip mulch, and that's going to help to suppress the weeds and also keep the bed moist and keep the moisture in while these cuttings establish. Hopefully within a couple of months we'll be seeing some nice growth coming from these buds at the top of the cuttings, and then, as mentioned, by the autumn they should have established a really nice root network into this area, and these could be grown on. We can harvest from these later on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Phil. That was a brilliant video. I think it was really nicely done and really clear way of showing exactly how you did that. Yeah, are you there, Phil? Hello.
I'm here, Will. Yes.
Hello. Fantastic. Couple of questions I've got about the process there, and I think there's been a few questions coming in. The lengths of willow that you started from at the very beginning, you had they looked about 6-8 foot tall lengths of willow. Are they how long did they take to grow, and can you just remind us how many cuttings you can get from each one of those? I think that would be useful for letting people know how many, if they're trying to grow willow to propagate from for a planting project, how many they might need.
Yeah, so the willow that was in the short video there, I mentioned that was 2 years growth. So those slips were planted back in 2022, and they were planted in a willow bed. So as I mentioned earlier, there's quite a difference between the growth that you'll get from a container and the growth that you'll get from a willow bed.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you. And the few people have been asking this, and then so obviously you talked about the willow there, and you said cornice or dogwood takes very well to hardwood cuttings as well. Are there any other species that you could do this for? People have asked about hazel. Somebody's asked about nipping up here. Paul has asked about, would apple take from hardwood cuttings? They've got a veteran apple tree that's been felled recently, and she's confident of grafting, but would hardwood cutting do as well?
So some things do a lot better than others. Someone mentioned hazel there. So hazel is not particularly easy to propagate from a cutting, but it does layer really well. So what you find within a traditional sort of hazel woodland, there'll often be layered shoots. that are laid down, so they're still attached to the mother plant, and they'll root a lot more readily, a lot better than doing a cutting from hazel that can be a little bit trickier. Hazel's really good to just grow from the seed, from the nut, but again, that can be quite challenging in terms of actually collecting those nuts before the squirrels get them. With the apple, so I do find that apple does root very readily from hardwoods, so it roots quite quickly. But again, one of the issues that you have is that a lot of domestic apples that we grow, they'll be grown on a root stock. So if you're growing from a cutting, you're going to end up with quite a large tree because it's growing on its own roots, and it's going to take quite a long time to bear fruit as well. So you'll find the majority of the apples that are available will be a grafted apple that's grown on a particular rootstock. And that does apply for quite a lot of the ornamental crab apples as well. There'll be a grafted crab apple onto another malus rootstock. But again, you know, it's fine to grow apples from seed as well. You'll end up with a very big tree, but again, as I said, it will take longer to fruit.
Brilliant, thanks, Phil. And just for clarity, you mentioned layering. Could you just briefly outline what layering is for people who don't know?
So a layer, so a lot of trees will do this process quite naturally, and it's a bit of a sort of regeneration method for some trees. So you'll often find you get quite old yew trees that will lay down a branch that will touch the ground, and that will be a layer, and then the tree will regenerate from that branch. So it's used as a kind of a propagation technique where you might want to, again, sort of expand a hazel coppice. So you would lay down branches of hazel and pin them into the ground. You'll often wound around the bud, where the bud is, where it goes into the ground, and that just encourages a little bit of rooting. And then you will get a new rooted section that you can then potentially either leave in situ to expand your coppice, or you can cut that off. So you'll often find that layering can be more successful than hardwood cuttings for plants that struggle a little bit more from a hardwood cutting, because it's still attached to the mother plant. So it's still getting a supply of nutrients coming from the mother plant, rather than severing it and just relying on the energy that's held within that cutting. You can do air layers as well. So where you might have a higher branch that you might want to actually take a section of branch off, you can do an air layer where you may not be able to bring it down to soil level.
We should say here at this point that Phil and Annie from the Tree Council did do a Tree Council talk on this during seed gathering season. So that is also on our YouTube channel, which kind of goes into a bit more detail on taking cuttings, doing layering, and a bit on grafting as well. I'm conscious that we are about to go to some more questions and answers, but for people who are we're just coming for the talk, I just wanted to say a very big thank you, and so much. Yes, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found it really useful. For those anybody who's leaving now, it'd be really useful if you could fill in a feedback form, which has been linked in the chat, or if you're watching this online in the future, if you could follow the address that's on the slide now. So this feedback form is from one of our partner organisations who are carrying out research into how people can be better supported to grow trees as part of the Shared Outcomes Trees Outside Woodlands project. And full information about the purposes of this form and data usage and things that are actually within the link. But your feedback is really, really welcome. So thank you all so much for coming. And what we'll do is that we'll now go to questions and answers. So I'll stop sharing the screen again. Okay, so we've had loads and loads of questions and answers coming in. And I will go, I'll have a little flick through. So from Alistair, we've got, does it matter growing from seed and the genetic diversity versus grafting? Is that just important for edible fruit growers to guarantee fruit is consistent? I think from my point of view, it depends on the purposes of the tree that you're trying to grow. So some trees obviously do take readily to cuttings, but that will be a genetically identical copy of what you're taking the cutting from. In some circumstances, this can be really beneficial. So in a more amenity setting or an urban setting, tree planters often will choose a tree for a specific growth type, and this might be because that tree might tolerate porous soils better. It might bear more fruit. So there are certain characteristics you can use to by cloning to making sure that you get these characteristics. However, then there is the issue that if there is a pest and disease or something that comes and attacks that particular genotype, then you lose. Then they're more at risk. So I think a balance between good genetic diversity by growing from seed, which obviously has gone through the kind of natural cycle, and going and cuttings and trying to choose your own characteristics is good. So a balance is needed. As Phil or Matt, have you got any insights on that as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I totally agree with you, Will. I think, for a CTN, I'd recommend, you can use a combination of growing from seed where you get the genetic diversity, but then also, it's quite fun to do a little bit of vegetative propagation. And what you find with vegetative propagation, it will come true to type. So as you said, you want particular characteristics from that tree. You can gain that through vegetative propagation, although you're creating a clone, so there's not the diversity. But one of the things that the Tree Council is really focused on is actually trying to find, trees for every situation. And we do really condone having the right tree for the right position, rather than planting an inappropriate species in the wrong location that could cause issues later on. So again, that's where it might be quite useful if you've got really known characteristics of a tree. You can make sure that you're getting your tree selection correct. And rootstocks can help with a whole variety of different situations as well. So they can control the size and the vigor of the tree. They can be good for pest and disease resistance as well. And then also very useful for particular soil conditions. So I think it can be very useful to think about vegetative propagation. But again, we do still want that genetic diversity from growing from seed too.
Brilliant, thanks, Phil. We've got a question from HD who has asked a couple of questions. What size pots do we need, and standard pots versus long pots? And also how best to dig seedlings and transplant them? Is there a size limit? Can there be issues with tap roots? How best to transplant for success? So could you guys tell us a bit more about that? Maybe looking at different size pots and what we might need, and whether root trainers or kind of more standard 2-litre pots, etc. would be better. Matt, what have you used in the past?
So obviously we currently don't grow in the ground. Obviously, I know from tap roots you will get issues with that if you do grow in the ground, but like I said, I have limited knowledge of that, so I'll let Phil cover that in a moment. There you go, Phil. But from pots wise, I find you can obviously use shallow pots. The bigger issue, I suppose, is how quickly you get them back out. Like with any plant, if you use a small pot, it's going to become pot bound. I tend to use the small ones to get them germinated, get them going, and then I move them onto a larger pot. So you can start with small, but I would suggest, at least 4 inches or so, at least for mine. Otherwise, they do tend to ball up in the roots. But then, having said that, most of the cell grown ones that you get from other nurseries like Wickham Trust, etc., they come in with very small, compact roots. So it is possible. They just find that the more compact the roots are, the slower they tend to be when you get them in. If without the bare root ones, they flourish and they go straight away, nice, free flowing. Whereas the compacted, really tight meshed ones take a real long time, it seems, to kind of get used to their surroundings and venture out. So that would be my top tip. Go for as big as you've got, really. I think would be the advice from me.
I think before we talk about the potential bare root side of things and the taproot issue, it's important to look at with containerized trees. You need to think about the longevity of where that tree is going to go. Where is it going to be in the ground, and for how long? If we can assume that we're planting trees to be there for their natural life cycle, then it's important that any tree root defects are minimized. So often when you plant into a container, if you plant in a circular container and you leave it in for too long, you can get these circular roots that go around the side. As the tree grows to become a mature tree, quite often they can become what's called root girdling. And you see it a lot in kind of urban trees and trees in kind of pavements and things. And the roots essentially have gone round in the container, which has been fine when the tree's been tiny. But once it's grown up into a mature tree, then these roots that are already going round then essentially eat in and cut the water supply that kind of eats into the bark and into the water supply systems of the tree. So then it can lead to poor health and instability going on 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We do know in urban trees that a street tree's lifespan is considerably lower than it is in the wild. So it's important to think where we're planting and thinking, okay, well, we're gonna make sure that we've given the tree the best chance in life by making sure that it's not got any root defects if we can. But Phil, have you got any advice about rootstocks? Rootstock, sorry, taproots.
Taproots. I mean, a lot of trees that are grown commercially that might be grown in the field, obviously they're subject to undercutting. And so that's going to be severing some of the tap roots and encouraging fibrous growth, like a more compact fibrous growth from root system. And I think that's probably one of, I mean, from my opinion, that's kind of one of the secrets of what you're trying to achieve with plants that you're growing within your CTN. You want a really healthy fibrous root system. And you can kind of achieve that with, you know, thinking about the planting mix that you're going to be using. So using a really nice mix that's going to be quite open structured and encourage some really nice fibrous rooting. I mean, it's there's that tricky thing around the kind of pros and cons of bare root and cell grown. And I think you've got an advantage with the cell grown that they're smaller plants. And generally, the kind of the ethos of the tree council is the smaller the plant that you can put in, as long as it's reasonably robust and hardened off, it's going to actually establish better with less requirements than a larger tree. The cell grown trees can be a little bit fiddly to plant and obviously a little bit more, I guess, delicate. So I think in terms of actually the tree itself, it's a little bit more vulnerable because it's smaller, but they're less prone to drying out because you've obviously got that, you know, you've got that soil around the root system. So they're less vulnerable than a bare root tree that might have been left out. So a lot of the tree failures that we're getting on a national scale, they may well be resulting from people leaving trees out and not planting them quick enough. The bare rooted trees, and they're drying in the air. Whereas of a cell grown tree, you've got a little bit more protection. So they can handle a little bit of rougher treatment and you know, being out of the cells for a little bit longer. And something good to think is obviously, you know, kind of the embedded carbon in your tree production. So the whole thing about CTNs is trying to minimize, you know, the resources that you're using and trying to be as sustainable as possible. So whether you've got, you know, an option that you can just specialize in growing cell grown trees and recycle all of those cell trays, the cell units, and maybe invest in some slightly longer lasting, more robust cell trays that are going to last for 10 years rather than a couple of seasons. That might be something that you want to consider. But again, it will really depend on, you know, the types of trees that you're looking to produce. And it may well be beneficial to have a range of different tree sizes that you have available to make you a viable enterprise, because I think that's something you will have to think about for a CTN. You know, you need to be actually generating income so you can keep doing the great work that you're doing.
Brilliant, thank you. On the subject of pots again, there are different types of pots which can be used and can be really good for kind of the formation of nice root systems. So using things like air pots, which I've got essentially they wrap around and then you fill them with the soil and you grow your tree in. And because they've got holes in the outside, the tree's roots will grow up to them, but they won't grow out and they won't girdle. They will sense that it's air and they'll think, oh, stay away, and they won't send roots out or around. So they tend to end up with a very fibrous root system, which is then good when you're transplanting them, because then they've got all these fibrous roots, which are the really important ones for absorbing water and nutrients. We've got another one here from Bridget, who says, how cold does it have to be to break the dormancy? I think it's about 4 or 5 degrees centigrade. So we need to try and match kind of average soil or some soil temperatures that we get in the ground. Don't necessarily want freezing, as you can get frost damage to our seeds, but it does need these very low temperatures sitting just above freezing for a good period of time in order to kickstart them into germinating in the spring. We've got a question here from Jane, who said, how do you separate your cuttings without damaging their roots? I don't know, Phil, if you can give us that answer.
You have to be very gentle. So you have to just tease them out. And I suppose the secret is, so ideally when you're taking hardwood cuttings, you're going to be leaving them for one growing season. So you can potentially do your cuttings when they're dormant, and then again as they start moving into dormancy, that's a good time to separate them. If you potentially leave them any longer, so if you're kind of approaching more 2 seasons, then obviously you're going to be developing a much more dense root system, and they're going to be a lot harder to dismantle and disentwine. If when they're grown commercially, hardwood cuttings, you'll often have a cutting bed that might be sand based, and then the cuttings will be lined out in that sand based bed where they're a lot easier to lift. And when you're looking at doing maybe semi-ripe cuttings and softwood cuttings, they're a little bit more awkward, and you often need more specialized equipment to do those sorts of cuttings, such as mist units or heated benches. So I would say just be quite cautious. If you use quite a loose planting medium as well, then hopefully having a mixture of some soil and potentially a little bit of well-rotted wood chip and some compost, hopefully that structure is going to fall away quite easily when you come to actually loosen your cuttings. But you may well get some damage to the root system, but as long as you've got a reasonable amount of root, then once they've been potted on individually, they will develop a new root system from there. So as long as you're not damaging all of the root, then you should be absolutely fine.
Okay, brilliant. And yeah, as Phil said, in tree nurseries, there is a process of undercutting and root pruning, which can encourage new roots. So there are some root damage is tolerable. Different species obviously take it differently. We've got one for Matt from Paul, who says he'd be interested in the well-being aspect for the children of your community tree project. Has there been any looking into that kind of side of things?
Yeah, definitely. I think from the get-go, I guess when we've been planting trees, encourage a connection with the trees. So when the children are planting the trees, they're giving them a name. That helps. On their break times, lunch times, they're going and they're checking on their trees. Become quite intrinsically fascinated by their tree. How's it doing? And they're always like, that one needs water, or so they're very good with that. But yeah, I think most children, whether in my school, definitely now know the benefits of trees, now know why we have trees, the oxygen, the sequestration, and all the rest of it. They all know that. I think it's a lot harder to get across from a teaching perspective, because it's just not out there in the teaching domain on the actual connection side to it. And actually, they are really good for well-being, and just taking some time and just to sit next to a tree and just think, actually, this is more than this is a sentient being. It's not so much about it just being a block of wood and it doing nothing. It's got all of these senses of taste and smell and sight and things like that. And so we go through all of that with the children. And yeah, I'd like to see it in more schools. And I think as we're working now across the country, we're slowly getting out there. But yeah, there is definitely more to trees than just their scientific value, and we try and encourage that with our children.
Brilliant, thanks, Matt. The one from Alice who said that I read that to sell tree seedlings, you must be registered as a forest reproductive material or FRM supplier. Do you need this registration to give trees away for free? Also, to sell tree seedlings online, do you need this registration on top of registration to issue plant passports? It's quite a tricky question in parts, but if you are looking to give away your trees in your local area, you won't need to be registered. When that comes in, when you will start needing to be registered, if you are looking to be say an online supplier or a supplier that's going to be moving that tree material over large distances, including getting couriers and sending it across the country, that's when you would need to be looking at getting registered with FRM, and then absolutely, if you're looking to send them out abroad, then it'll be plant passports and the rest of it. But from a local point of view, you can absolutely give your trees away. But I think and there was a lot of talk about this at the moment because some of these systems and registrations are quite. There's a lot of kind of things you have to do in order to get them, something like forest reproductive materials supplier. So they can be sometimes a little bit unattainable for somebody who's just growing a couple of trees in their garden or within a community group. So I think the what we mustn't kind of underestimate is the importance of just including good practice in what you do. So with regard to biosecurity, if you can just get some really easy basics in there, that could be when you go out and collecting seed, you are recording what species and where you got it from, and then when you bring it back to the nursery and process it, you then put those in pots or raised beds where you are labeling exactly where they're from. And if you're giving them away, you say the trees that you have to go and plant came from here, so that once they're growing in their final location, if there is a pest disease that springs up on one, there is a traceability going directly back to where you collected that seed from in case it came from there. There's also other things you can do, like making sure that when you're planting your trees, say in raised beds, or you're kind of grouping pots together, you try and group the same species together and maybe keep gaps in between rows so there's good airflow and things. Prevent it, making sure there's no, like Matt was talking about, with waterlogging of soil and how that can bring kind of rotten things into plants. Basic things like that can make your trees be healthier. And it's similar to us. Healthy trees are less susceptible to pests and diseases because they're not under threat. If we think about when we're run down, we are more likely to get a pest, maybe not a pest, but not a disease. We're more likely to get ill. It's exactly the same with trees. If you can do things to keep your trees healthy, you're less likely to get tree pests and diseases. Okay, we'll move on to another one now. I'm conscious of time, got a couple of minutes left, so we'll go for one more.
I was just going to really quickly cut in and just say around the registration. I mean, the Tree Council actively supports local community tree nurseries, and we want to see them flourish across the UK. So generally, as long as there are good practices, we're quite happy to procure from tree nurseries. So I think some of the bigger commercial growers don't have all of the quality standards that are out there. So I think the key thing is start small and just have good practices. And again, if you're doing local collection, that's going to be a big benefit to you.
Brilliant, thank you. And a final one from Brenda, who says, really keen to propagate as many native trees as possible to plant up our barren school playground. Available cash in schools is an issue at the moment owing to significantly increased routine costs. We've had a Tree Council grant to plant up other areas in the school, and they're coming along well. I want to involve the kids in this, and I'm planning to use seed and vegetative propagation. What are your top tips to guarantee speedy success? Matt, that sounds like one that it could be one for you. Top tips for speedy success in growing and planting trees in the garden.
Yeah, again, I think for speed, it's definitely going to be cuttings. I guess they will come along a lot quicker than the seeds. So if you can do that, I would go for that. To be honest, it's you can't really speed up nature any quicker than it will go, I guess. So it's just like Phil was saying, just be really careful with what you're doing. Start small. Make sure you're really putting some attention into what you're doing. Make sure you've got the watering system. Again, I should probably mention this earlier. It's vital. I lost a lot of trees over the years to inadequate watering systems, which I've now rectified. So I would say that's a top tip. The more you water them, the quicker they will grow to a point. Obviously, you don't want to just throw them in the river. But yeah, if you keep them well watered, that will help. They accelerate the growth.
And over summer watering as well, that's super important.
Yeah,
making sure.
So in my CTN, I've set up an irrigation system, so it comes on a timer, so it gets exactly the water it needs, not wasting water, and that runoff where we have the rainwater. When that runs down, then the stopcock will kick in, and we'll use tap water. Well, fortunately,
brilliant. But it's that continuity of care throughout all seasons is what they need. So you're not kind of giving them the best chance in life up till summer holidays, and then over summer holidays they don't get anything, and then you're losing loads. Continuity through. Okay, I'm conscious of the time, so just want to thank so much yourself, Matt, and Phil for coming along today and being here and doing your slots. It's been really useful, and I hope everybody else has found it really useful. I want to thank Annie, who's been behind the scenes, helping with question and answer and things. I want to thank Kaylee as well, who's done all the advertising and got such an amazing sign up for the event today. We had over 700 people who signed up, and yeah, we had hundreds of people logging on. So it's fantastic to see so many people interested in this area. Again, it'd be really useful if you could fill in the feedback form. So there'll be a link in the chat, and we can send the link around as well. But from all of us at the Tree Council, thank you so much, and we'll see you at one of our upcoming tree talks. Thank you very much.